There is an ancient practice still carried on by farmers, gardeners, and those who work closely with the earth. They plant by the moon. Not because they are superstitious, but because they have observed, across generations, that seeds sown when the moon is new and waxing have a different vitality than those planted when the moon is dark or waning. The lunar cycle, they say, governs germination. It governs the pull of moisture upward through the soil. It governs the timing of growth. And here is what I want you to consider tonight. Neville Goddard, who rarely spoke of astrology or lunar cycles in explicit terms, used the exact same metaphor as the foundation of his entire teaching. He told you to plant a seed. He told you to plant it in darkness. He told you to plant it at the precise moment of desire, the inception point, and then to leave it alone, to trust the unseen process, to let consciousness itself draw it upward into form. What if the moon was never just a celestial body? What if it was always a symbol, a living metaphor encoded into the rhythms of nature, for the very process Neville spent 50 years describing? What if the new moon and the act of imagining from the wish fulfilled are not two separate practices, but two languages for the same creative law? Let's find out. Welcome to Neville Goddard Universe. I'm your host, and this is a space for those who sense that Neville's teaching is not an isolated system, but a living current that runs through the great mystical and esoteric traditions of the world. Each episode, we take a concept from Neville and hold it up to another tradition, not to dilute his teaching, but to see it reflected back in different words, different symbols, and sometimes different centuries. The truth doesn't change, only the language does. Tonight, we're exploring something deeply practical and deeply poetic, the moon as a symbol for planting seeds of desire. This is for beginners and seasoned students alike, because no matter how long you've studied Neville, the core metaphor, desire as seed, imagination as soil, assumption as planting, is where the teaching lives. And when you understand that metaphor through the lens of the lunar cycle, something clicks, not just intellectually, but viscerally. You begin to feel the rhythm of manifestation, not just think about it. If this exploration resonates with you, if you sense there's something here worth walking alongside, a like or a subscription helps this work reach those ready to hear it, and I'm grateful for every mind that joins us on this path. Now, let's begin where Neville always began, with the seed. Neville said it plainly over and over across the decades. Desire is a seed planted in the soil of consciousness. That's not poetry for its own sake. It's instruction. It's a precise description of how creation works. Listen to how he puts it in his 1950s lectures, when the teaching was at its most distilled and practical. He said, "You do not create, you plant. And what you plant in imagination, consciousness brings to harvest." He told his audiences in Los Angeles and New York and London, ordinary people, not mystics, not initiates, that every desire they felt was already a seed given to them by life itself. The desire for health, for love, for recognition, for freedom. These were not random. They were not frivolous. They were seeds. And the only question was whether you would plant them or let them dry out in your hand. The planting, Neville said, is assumption. It is the act of entering the state of the wish fulfilled and dwelling there long enough for the seed to take root. He called this SATS, the state akin to sleep, but the principle extends beyond the technique. The planting happens whenever you dare to assume that what you desire is already true, when you feel it is done, when you think from it, not of it. Let me give you a concrete example, because Neville never taught in abstractions. He gave testimonies, he gave cases. So let's take one. A woman comes to Neville in the early 1950s. She wants to marry a specific man. He's shown no interest. In fact, he's dating someone else. She's been affirming, visualizing, hoping, and nothing has moved. Neville listens, and then he says, "You're not planting. You're standing over the ground with the seed in your hand, wishing it would grow." She asks what that means. He tells her, "Go home tonight. Lie down. Enter the drowsy state. and construct a single scene that implies the wish fulfilled. A wedding ring on your finger, the feel of it, the weight. His voice calling you his wife. Just one scene. Live in it until it feels natural. Then sleep. That's the planting. She does it. Not once. She does it every night for weeks. And here's what Neville emphasizes. She doesn't do it with strain. She doesn't do it while arguing with doubt during the day. She plants the seed at night, in the state akin to sleep, and during the day she lets it be. She tends her inner conversations, yes. She stops telling the old story, but she doesn't dig up the seed to check if it's sprouting. She trusts the dark. 3 months later, the man proposes. He ends the other relationship. He says he can't explain it, but he can't imagine his life without her. The outer world rearranges itself to match the inner fact. Now, this is the structure of Neville's teaching. Desire is the seed. Imagination is the soil. SATS is the act of planting. Persistence, returning to the state night after night, is the watering. And the harvest comes in its season, not by your effort, but by law. By the law of consciousness. Neville says in Feeling is the Secret, one of his shortest and most potent books. The subconscious is the womb of creation. It receives the impression of desire and, in a way unknown to man, molds the outer world to reflect it. The womb, the soil, the dark, the unseen. This is not mechanical. This is organic. This is biological, in the deepest sense. You are working with life itself. And here's the key that beginners miss. The seed is not the vision. The seed is the feeling. The emotional conviction that it is done. You can visualize 100 different scenes, but if you don't feel the reality of the wish fulfilled, if the seed has no vitality, no life in it, it won't germinate. Neville was ruthless about this. He said, "Do not waste time picturing 1,000 things. Condense your desire into a single sensation of reality and drench yourself in it. The planting happens once. Or it happens a few times until the feeling is natural. But you don't plant the same seed every day for 6 months. You plant it, and then you let the law do its work. That's what Neville meant by the Sabbath. After the planting comes rest, not idleness, not doubt, but rest, the inner knowing that it is done. So when Neville says, assume the wish fulfilled, he is not asking you to pretend. He is asking you to plant. To place the seed of desire into the only soil that can bring it to life, your own consciousness, and to trust the process that you cannot see. This is the teaching. And if you stop here, it's complete. But now, let's see what happens when we map this metaphor onto the lunar cycle. Because something extraordinary appears. The moon does not create light, it reflects it, and in doing so, it governs rhythm. The tides, the menstrual cycle, the cycles of growth and decay in nature. Ancient agricultural societies didn't worship the moon. They observed it. And what they observed was this. The moon moves through phases, and each phase corresponds to a different kind of energy in the natural world. The new moon is the dark moon. It is the moment of inception, the seed beneath the soil, the beginning of the cycle. And this is the moment, farmers found, when planting has the most potency. Not because the moon exerts a mystical force, but because the new moon marks a turning point. The shift from waning to waxing, from release to accumulation, from emptiness to fullness. In esoteric traditions, the new moon has always symbolized potential. In Kabbalistic astrology, it is the moment when the vessel is emptied and ready to receive a new influx of light. In tarot, it echoes the energy of the Fool, the 0 point, the leap, the beginning before the story has form. In Hermetic philosophy, it aligns with the principle of rhythm. Everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. And here's the recognition I want you to feel. Neville's instruction to assume the wish fulfilled at the moment of desire, the very inception of the wish, is the new moon. It is the planting at the point of darkness, before there is any visible evidence. before the world has shifted, before the sprout has broken through the soil. He tells you, the best time to plant is now, not when circumstances improve, not when you feel more ready, now, at the point of desire. That is new moon energy. That is the principle of beginning in the dark. Let's go deeper. In the lunar agricultural cycle, the 2 weeks following the new moon, the waxing phase, are the period of growth. The seed draws moisture upward. The roots establish. The plant pushes toward the surface. The farmer does not dig it up to check. The farmer waters, tends, protects, but does not interfere. This is the phase of faith. Neville calls this persistence. He says in The Law and the Promise, persistence is not repetition of the same act. It is the inner faithfulness to the state assumed. In other words, you don't replant the seed every night. You return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled until it becomes natural, until it is no longer an effort, but a fact of your inner world. That's watering, that's tending, but it is not doubt, it is not anxious checking. And then comes the full moon, the moment of manifestation, the harvest, the visible expression of what was planted in darkness. The outer world, at last, reflects the inner fact. The seed has become the fruit. Neville says, the world is yourself pushed out. That's the full moon. That's the harvest. The external confirmation of the internal state. But, and this is crucial, the manifestation is not the goal. The state is the goal. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the goal. The harvest simply proves that the law works. But you, as the gardener, are not waiting for the harvest to feel fulfilled. You felt fulfilled the moment you planted the seed in the right soil. Now, let's bring in a direct teaching from the lunar tradition and translate it into Neville's language. There's a beautiful line from an old grimoire of folk magic, passed down through European agricultural communities. Plant by the new moon if you want it to grow above ground. Plant by the waning moon if you want it to grow below ground. On the surface, this is about planting carrots versus planting corn. But esoterically, it's about visibility and invisibility. About what you want to manifest outwardly versus what you want to transform inwardly. Neville would say it this way. If you want the outer world to change, assume the state of the wish fulfilled and persist in it. If you want your inner world to change, your self-concept, your habitual feelings, revision and inner conversation are your tools. The new moon is assumption. The waning moon is revision. One plants the new, one clears the old. And here's where the metaphor becomes practice. If you've been trying to manifest something and it hasn't moved, ask yourself, am I planting or am I wishing? Am I entering the state and feeling it real, or am I standing on the surface, affirming words I don't believe? Because the moon doesn't respond to your words. It responds to rhythm, to cycle, to the organic timing of growth. And consciousness is the same. You can't force a seed to sprout by shouting at it. You can only give it the right conditions and let the law unfold. The new moon is not magic. The new moon is a symbol. And Neville's teaching is not superstition. It is law. But when you see that the symbol and the law are pointing to the same truth, that creation begins in darkness, that planting happens at the point of desire, that persistence is the watering and manifestation is the harvest, then the metaphor becomes lived. It becomes felt. Neville said, dare to assume it. The new moon says, dare to plant in the dark. Let's make this concrete. I'm going to walk you through a practice that fuses Neville's method with the lunar metaphor, not because you need the moon to make this work, but because the symbol can deepen your feeling of alignment with a rhythm larger than yourself. And feeling, as Neville said, is the secret. First, identify the desire. What is the seed? Don't make it vague. Don't say, I want to be happy. Say, I want to feel at home in my body. Say, I want to be celebrated for my work. Say, I want to walk into my new apartment and feel that I belong there. The seed must have life. It must carry feeling. Second, Choose the moment of planting. If you want to use the lunar cycle as a rhythmic anchor, wait for the new moon. Not because you have to, but because it gives your unconscious mind a clear marker. This is the beginning. But if the desire is alive in you right now, tonight, then tonight is your new moon. Desire itself is the signal. Neville said, "The moment you feel the desire, the seed is given. Don't delay the planting." Third, enter the state akin to sleep. Lie down. Let your body go loose. Breathe slowly. Feel yourself sinking into that borderland between waking and sleep. This is the fertile state. This is when the conscious mind releases its grip and the subconscious becomes receptive. Fourth, construct the scene. One scene, short, sensory, implying the wish fulfilled. If the desire is the apartment, feel the key in your hand. Feel the door opening. Hear the sound of your footsteps on the floor that is now yours. See the light coming through the window. Don't narrate it. Live it. First person. Present tense. Real. Fifth, loop the scene until the feeling saturates you, not the feeling of wanting it, the feeling of having it. Neville called this the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It's relief, it's satisfaction, it's naturalness. It's the quiet inner knowing that it is done. You don't need to see the whole scene perfectly. You need to feel it completely. Sixth, release it. When the feeling is full, let the scene go. Don't hold on to it. Don't try to keep it alive by force. Let it dissolve into sleep. This is the planting. The seed is in the soil. The work is done. Now, here's the part that requires discipline. Don't replant it the next day out of fear. If the feeling was real, if the state was entered fully, the seed is planted. What you do next is persist in the state. That means during the day when the old thoughts come. It's not here yet, nothing's changing. You gently correct them, not with force, with knowing. You say inwardly, "It is done. I felt it. I planted it. The law is unfolding." That's watering. If the feeling begins to fade, if doubt creeps in, return to the scene that night. Not because you're replanting, but because you're reminding yourself of the state. You're watering. But if the feeling stays natural, if you find yourself thinking from the wish fulfilled rather than of it, then you've entered the waxing phase. You're in the growth period. Let it be. And here's the lunar addition. If it speaks to you, each night between the new moon and the full moon, as you fall asleep, simply affirm inwardly, "The seed is growing. Consciousness is bringing it to harvest. I rest in the knowing." That's all. No visualization needed. Just the affirmation of trust, of rhythm, of law. Then, when the full moon comes, or when the manifestation appears in the outer world, which may be sooner or later than 2 weeks, receive it without surprise. Don't be shocked that it worked. Neville said, "The sign that you've truly assumed the state is that the manifestation feels natural, not miraculous." When the harvest comes, you don't say, "I can't believe it." You say, "Of course, I planted it." This is the practice. Desire, seen, feeling, planting, persistence, harvest. And if you want to anchor it in the lunar cycle, you're not doing something different from Neville's teaching. You're giving your inner gardener a calendar, a rhythm, a way to stop second-guessing and start trusting the organic process of growth. Try it, not as a superstition, not as a ritual that only works on certain days, but as a way to feel the truth Neville was always pointing to, that creation is not labor, it is law. And law, like the moon, does not fail. Let's step back now and ask the larger question, why does this work? Why does the metaphor of the moon and the seed, separated by centuries from Neville's teaching, feel so precisely aligned with what he said? I think the answer is this: because consciousness is the only reality, and reality is structured like a rhythm, like a cycle, like a living, breathing system of growth and decay, of planting and harvest, of darkness and light. The moon doesn't create the cycle, it reveals it. It makes visible a pattern that exists in all of life. And Neville didn't invent the law of assumption. He discovered it, Or rather, he remembered it. He remembered what mystics and farmers and poets have always known, that the invisible precedes the visible, that the inner is the cause and the outer is the effect, that you plant in the dark and reap in the light. The reasoned traditions across the world, from Hermeticism to Kabbalah to the agricultural wisdom of indigenous cultures, keep arriving at the same truth, is not because they copied each other. It's because they were all observing the same reality, consciousness. And consciousness operates by law, the law of assumption, the law of rhythm, the law of correspondence. Call it what you will, the principle is the same. Neville said, "I am not teaching you something new. I am reminding you of what you already know." And the moon says the same thing. Every month, every cycle, it says, you know how to plant. You know how to trust the dark. You know how to wait for the harvest. You've been doing it since the beginning of time. What's radical about Neville is not the metaphor. What's radical is his insistence that you are the gardener, that you are not at the mercy of the moon or fate or circumstance, that your imagination is the soil, and your assumption is the seed, and your persistence is the watering, that you are not waiting for the right planetary alignment or the right external condition. You are the condition. You are the alignment. The world is yourself pushed out. That means every harvest you see was planted by you. Every barren field was left unplanted by you. Not because you're to blame, but because you're empowered. If you planted it, you can plant differently. If the old crop was bitter, plant sweetness. If the old story was lack, plant abundance. The moon will still cycle. The seasons will still turn. But you are the one who chooses what grows. And here's the final recognition. The moon is always new again. Every month, the cycle begins fresh. You are never trapped in the old story. You are never too late. There is always another planting season. There is always another moment to assume the wish fulfilled, to enter the state, to feel it real. That's what the beginner needs to hear. Not that the process is complicated, not that you need to get it perfect, but that the law is faithful, that the rhythm is real, that the dark is not a problem. It's the condition for growth. Neville told a story late in his life about a woman who came to him in despair. She said, "I've tried everything, nothing works. I've visualized, I've affirmed, I've assumed, and my life is still the same." And Neville said to her gently, "You haven't tried everything. You haven't tried resting in the knowledge that it is done. You've planted the seed 100 times, but you've never let it grow. That's the moon. That's the teaching. Plant once with feeling, then rest, then trust, then receive." So if you came to this episode asking where to begin, if you're new to Neville, or if you've been studying him for years but something hasn't clicked, begin here. Begin with the seed. Begin with the metaphor that he returned to again and again, because it's not just poetry, it's instruction. And if you want to know which 3 Neville lectures to read first on this theme, here they are. Read Feeling is the Secret, cover to cover. It's short. It's clear. It contains the entire teaching. Then listen to his 1954 lecture, Seed Time and Harvest, where he unpacks the agricultural metaphor in full. And finally, read the opening chapters of The Law and the Promise, where he gives testimony after testimony of people who planted a seed in imagination and reaped a harvest in the outer world. If this way of seeing the teaching has opened something for you, if it's made the process feel less like mechanics and more like participation in a living rhythm, then a like or a subscription is a quiet way of saying, you're here, you're listening, and you're walking this path too. I'm grateful for it. And tonight, as you fall asleep, let yourself feel this, that you are not separate from the cycles of nature, or the rhythms of the cosmos, or the laws of consciousness. You are the moon and the seed and the soil. You are the gardener and the garden. And the harvest you seek is already planted, already growing, already on its way. You don't have to force it. You don't have to fear it. You only have to assume it, feel it, and let the law unfold. Dare to plant in the dark. Dare to assume the wish fulfilled. And dare to rest in the knowledge that what you have planted in imagination, consciousness will bring to harvest. Not because you hoped, not because you wished, but because you dared to feel it real. The moon is turning. The cycle is beginning again. And you are the one who decides what grows.